best entertainment on the earth. Tune in for Comics with Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. What constitutes a conflict of interest? Well, typically when you're trying to sell something and you're also working for that same thing and you're potentially the buyer of that thing, I mean, that starts to become a conflict of interest. I would argue that a classic conflict of interest many of you have probably seen in the past is when you have, say, a friendship and you then get in a position of authority and you're able to hire someone based on your friendship and you give that friend kind of preferential treatment, or rather you hire somebody who is not capable of doing the job, but you hire them anyway because it's your friend, you're trying to do your friend a favor. And there's a bit of a gray line there where, if it's a small business, there's a certain value to people you can trust and surrounding you with those people. But then in other ways, there is, if you're working for a company and you're not the owner, so you're working on somebody else's behalf, hiring in your friends constitutes a pretty significant conflict of interest. So here's a mail asking about another sort of conflict of interest, and this is around Penguin Random House. It says, "Yo, Perch, Penguin Random House just unleashed upon my store a very boisterous new sales rep, something we have not previously had from them. And his sales emails were over the top, sort of pushy, and very frequent." Now, first off, just pausing there. A lot of comic retailers have been desperate for more engagement from the distributor, more positive outreach engagement. That said, it's a very fine line to tip over into, hey, what do you need? What can we do to supply you? Here's some data about what's selling kind of in other markets around your store you might want to consider. Or, hey, we looked through your orders. We noticed this one book. All the other stores are ordering high on that book. You didn't. Did you want to relook at it or not? I think these are all, bringing value to the store. It's what a classic distributor relationship will do. You're trying to act in the best interest of the business that you're supporting. And you're doing that because it works in your self-interest as well. If that store is successful, they're going to order more things from you and everybody wins. So you want the shop to be successful, and you want them to order smart. You do not want them to get a bunch of excess stock they can't sell, because that's going to ultimately hurt your own relationship. But anyway, but I have seen reps in the past go over the top with books from their friends, books they may be financially attached to in some fashion, and it becomes a conflict of interest because the role as a retailer that you're expecting from the distributor is one of honest advice, one of fair market information. You're not looking for somebody who is going to potentially give you advice that acts in their self-interest against your own. That's not the relationship that you have. But it has happened many times. It sounds a little bit like it's happening here, because the mail goes on. "Yesterday or the day before, I saw the new IDW line announcement, and guess what? Matthew Klein, my new obnoxious sales rep, is one of the writers." Leading to the question, is it a conflict of interest to an IDW creator also as my Penguin Random House sales rep? Well, yes. On the surface, yes. That is I would say, a conflict of interest, unless, of course, the sales rep says, hey, full disclosure, there's some outreach about it. I am writing a title. It is a title in this line. I can't give you kind of advanced information or preferential information about my title. And I'm also not going to kind of obnoxiously promote my own work, because I'm supposed to be an independent third party as a distributor trying to get you books to sell. So, it depends on the person. So that move in and of itself is not a conflict of interest for you, the retailer. Now, arguably, Penguin Random House might, the thing is, comic books in this business is so small that nobody is really going to care about it. They probably should, and if there was more money flowing through all this, they probably would. But because there's not a lot of money flowing through it, you get these kinds of situations happening where an editor for one book can also be selling it to you on another. And it becomes very blurry and very messy, which is not uncommon when business is small, that this kind of thing happens. But it doesn't feel like, this doesn't taste right. It doesn't feel right. What you would expect is that in a healthy kind of industry, a kind of a normal, ethical functioning industry, that if somebody was going to be a writer for a book, now of course this inherently is the problems with comic books in the first place, because the writer is a freelancer, not a staff member. So as a freelancer, there's no long-term employment commitment. And so, these people need to be able to put food on their plates and support their families, or what have you. And so they are going to have other jobs. And being a sales rep, a distributor rep, and also writing comic books is not on the surface uncommon. And I would say it's, as far as you, the retailer, is concerned, it's not a conflict of interest on the surface. It can become one based on the behavior of the individual. So if your sales rep starts to, get very obnoxious about it, push those books over others, kind of waste your time promoting their own stuff over other things, then it is a conflict of interest. It's also just bad sales behavior. It's just not, that's not appropriate. That's not the appropriate behavior that you would expect from, somebody who's your distributor, somebody who's trying to make sure that you're getting what you need and your business is functioning strongly, smoothly, normally. Conflict of interest may be a little too strong a word here, but the behavior could certainly tip more into that. The bigger aspect to all this is that this doesn't make people feel good. This doesn't, and this is kind of the entire environment around comics that makes it feel less professional than it should be. And it's why you get some of these people raising eyebrows at behaviors from publishers and other things, because it often feels like a very small cottage industry, as opposed to, something that's trying to grow and build upon business and expand. And the problem is for retailers, and that's why a lot of retailers, I think, fall into two camps. You either have the retailer who's just a huge comic fan. They're more or less happy with their finances. They're not rich, but they're not poor, and they kind of can truck along doing what they're doing. And they have a clientele in their store, and it's their business. They're not they're not really fussed about anything. And those are the kind of people who really just want the world to stay exactly as it is. They're too old or too tired to change. It's the like Brian Hibbs, who's going to yell bloody murder anytime there's any kind of plan to distribute comics outside of the comic shop, even though doing so would help comic shops vastly more than it would hurt them. But to him, he's established kind of his business model, what he does. And so, the idea of the industry growing or changing is not really what he cares about or even in his best interest. He's got his world. He knows what his world looks like. And change for him means frustration. It's bother. But most businesses don't survive that way. And that the other type of comic retailer is a person who actually would like to have it be a business that makes money and they can sustain their livelihood on. And for those people, they bristle at things that appear to be nepotism or conflicts of interest like this, or just any kind of behavior that feels less like business and more like kind of shady business dealings, or things that are just random. Most business people who run a successful business or are trying to, will tell you that their biggest fear, their biggest concern, is when things are hard to predict. It's because in business, you want a nice, predictable landscape that you can plan against. Once things start getting very, very random, which can include, members of family members hiring family members who are not capable of doing the job, or, just strange outbursts on Twitter or Facebook. So many retailers, by the way, when, you saw those angry kind of over the top rants when DC left Diamond, a lot of retailers looked at that. The majority of retailers looked at that and said, this isn't good for us. This isn't good that we've got a bunch of people who are, claiming to represent retailers, screaming and hollering and acting like lunatics out there. It makes this entire industry, it makes everything about it feel like, it makes us look like a bunch of bozos. That's how it comes across. And so that's where people get sensitive about this stuff. And so when you look at kind of this action or other actions, a writer doing an IDW book is also your sales rep. I think your bigger concern, quite frankly, is the fact that your sales rep sounds like a tool. That to me sounds like the issue. The fact that he's a writer, again, in competent, capable hands, I think it would be fine. I think the person can certainly be professional and say, because there are always people who, when they're in these roles that are auxiliary to making comics, where their dream is they'd like to make a comic, they'd like to draw it or write it or whatever it happens to be. That's what they really want to do. They're taking this job for now, and so they, that's not unusual. It's not bad, but it does put a burden on them to act in the best interest of the job that they're in. When they're doing their distributor job, they should be being professional, trying to do the best for the client, trying to make sure that they're doing what they need to do. They're trying to do their job. If they're incapable of doing that, it really doesn't matter whether they're writing a comic book or editing it or who knows what they're doing. It's bad all around. Unprofessional is unprofessional, regardless of what the other piece is. And so, I mean, from your mail, sounds like the real issue with this guy is that he's pushy and he's acting kind of obnoxious. And is he helping out your business? That's probably the core problem. If now, because he's writing this book for IDW, if suddenly he's promoting that book and acting like a jackass about it, then really all he's doing is kind of revealing more of himself as himself, and that's a different problem. But anyway, that's my opinion on the matter. Weird situation to be in, and this is a problem. Comic books has a lot of these kinds of weird situations, and I think part of it getting stronger or healthier is the nepotism does have to stop. The weird hiring practices where people get brought in because of a relationship and association, or because somebody tweeted out, to get their friend into a book through kind of social pressure like that. These are all indications of how a non-healthy business operates. And these are the kinds of things that bring a lot of that out. But anyway, that's my opinion. So what would you do? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. And thanks for listening.